Emma stood in front of the mirror, staring at the reflection she barely recognized anymore. The woman looking back at her had tired eyes, faint lines from years of holding in emotions, and a smile that rarely reached her eyes. Her husband Mark was downstairs, probably watching the same late-night news show he always did. They had been married for 14 years and somewhere between paying bills, raising kids, and surviving life. Love had turned into a quiet routine. They weren't unhappy, but they weren't happy either. It was as if they were living side by side, not together, like two strangers who happened to share the same roof. Emma often wondered when the laughter stopped. She remembered the early days, the long drives, the coffee dates, the way Mark used to surprise her with flowers for no reason. But those things had faded over time. Now they spoke mostly about grocery lists, car repairs, and schedules. Every day felt predictable, safe, and painfully empty. One evening, as rain tapped against the windows, Emma found herself scrolling through old photos. She saw her younger self laughing beside Mark on a beach, her hair messy from the wind, his arm around her shoulders. They looked free, alive. That night, she quietly cried, not from sadness alone, but from the realization that she missed that version of herself more than anything. Mark wasn't a bad man. He was kind, hardworking, and loyal. But he had grown distant. Work had consumed him. When he came home, he was exhausted mentally and physically. He rarely noticed Emma's attempts to reconnect. A new dress, a cooked meal, a small note in his lunch, they went unnoticed, like whispers in a storm. Emma began feeling invisible. One Friday evening, Mark came home late again. He dropped his briefcase by the door and mumbled something about traffic. Emma had cooked his favorite meal, hoping they could talk, but he barely touched his food. His eyes stayed glued to his phone, replying to emails. "Mark, can we talk for a second?" She asked softly. "Yeah, sure," he said, not looking up. I feel like we've become different people lately. Like you're here, but not really here." Mark sighed, rubbing his temples. "Emma, I'm tired." "Okay. Work's been crazy. Can we talk about this later?" "Later," she repeated, her voice barely a whisper. She smiled sadly and cleared the dishes. That night, lying beside him, Emma stared at the ceiling. She felt the space between them, physical and emotional, like a wall she couldn't climb anymore. Mark turned away, already asleep, while she lay awake wondering if love could fade this quietly. A week later, her best friend Claire convinced her to join a small community event in town, a charity art show. Emma hesitated but finally agreed. "It might be good for you to get out," Claire said. "You've been cooped up too long." At the event, surrounded by paintings and soft music, Emma felt something she hadn't in years: light. People laughed, talked freely, and admired art that spoke of love, freedom, and passion. As she wandered the room, her eyes landed on a painting of a broken cup being pieced back together with gold, the Japanese art of kintsugi. The artist's note read, "Even what breaks can become beautiful again." The words hit her deeply. Beautiful, isn't it? A voice beside her said. She turned to see a man tall, with kind eyes and a warm smile. "I painted that one," he added. His name was David, a local artist and widower. They talked for a few minutes, mostly about the painting and its meaning. Emma didn't think much of it, just a kind exchange between strangers. But his words lingered with her long after she left the event. That night, she thought about the broken cup and the idea that maybe, just maybe, her life could be pieced back together too. Over the next few weeks, Emma started visiting the community center more often. She joined a small art class there, something she used to love but had long given up. David often helped the group, giving advice and encouragement. He was gentle, respectful, and spoke with the kind of attention Emma hadn't felt in years. One day, as she worked on a painting, he said, "You have a good eye for emotion. You paint how you feel." She smiled faintly. "Maybe, but some emotions are too heavy to paint." He looked at her for a long moment. "Then maybe those are the ones that most need to be." His words struck something in her heart. She didn't understand why his presence felt comforting. Maybe because he listened. Really listened without trying to fix her. Meanwhile, things at home remained the same. Mark was still buried in work. Dinners were quiet, conversations brief. Emma's laughter at the art center slowly returned, but at home she went silent again. She wasn't trying to replace her marriage. She just wanted to feel alive, to remember what it was like to be seen. One night, as she prepared for bed, Mark came in, phone in hand, talking about a project deadline. She waited for him to finish before softly saying, "Mark, when was the last time we did something together, just us?" He frowned, confused. "We see each other every day." "That's not the same," she replied gently. "You don't really see me anymore." Mark didn't know what to say. He stood there for a moment, then shrugged. "Emma, I'm doing my best. You know that?" "I know," she said, turning away before he could see the tears in her eyes. The next day, at the art center, David noticed she was quieter than usual. "You okay?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "Just tired." He smiled kindly. Sometimes being tired isn't just about sleep. Emma looked at him, really looked, and for the first time she felt the ache of being understood. It scared her. She knew she shouldn't feel anything more than friendship. Yet a part of her longed for the warmth that Mark once gave her so freely. When she got home that evening, Mark was asleep on the couch, TV still on. She turned it off and watched him for a moment. The man she had loved for so many years. The father of her children, the person she had built a life with. She felt sadness, guilt, and confusion all tangled together. She whispered softly, "I just wish you'd look at me the way you used to." Days passed, and the emotional gap grew. Emma didn't realize she was standing at a crossroads between duty and desire, between what was right and what her heart ached for it at the art center one evening. A sudden power outage left everyone in dim emergency light. David offered to walk her to her car. The night was cool, the air smelled of rain. As they reached her car, he said quietly, "You seem sad lately?" Emma managed a small smile. "It's complicated. Most real things are," he replied softly. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence between them felt heavy, filled with unspoken emotions. Then she stepped back, realizing what she was risking. "Thank you for walking me," she said. Forcing a smile, he nodded, understanding the boundary she drew, even if her eyes said otherwise. That night, Emma lay awake again, torn between guilt and longing. She wasn't angry at Mark. She was just lonely. Deeply lonely. She missed laughter, connection, touch, not in a physical sense, but in the way two souls once met without barriers. She realized she was searching for something that had been lost long before. She met David, something that started slipping away the moment she and Mark stopped trying to understand each other. As the clock ticked past midnight, Emma whispered to herself, "What am I doing?" It wasn't a confession. It was a plea to her heart, to her life, to the part of her that still hoped love could be repaired. And as rain began to fall softly outside, she made a silent promise to find herself again before she lost everything else. Days turned into weeks, and Emma felt herself caught between two worlds, the quiet stillness of her home and the gentle warmth of the art center. Her mornings began the same way, preparing breakfast, watching Mark rush through his routine and pretending everything was fine. But deep inside, something was changing. She was no longer numb. She was restless. She wanted to feel connected again to life, to herself, to love. Mark had started traveling more for work. Every time he packed his bag, she felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. It gave her time to think, to breathe. But it also left her alone in a house that no longer felt like home. The walls echoed with memories, laughter, shared meals, the sound of children once running through the halls. Now, it was just silence. One evening, Claire invited her for coffee. "You've been so distant lately," her friend said. "What's going on?" Emma hesitated. She didn't want to sound ungrateful. Mark provided for her. He cared in his own quiet way. But something inside her was fading. "I just feel invisible," Emma said softly. "Like I'm here, but I'm not really seen anymore." Claire reached over and squeezed her hand. "Marriage isn't always fireworks. Sometimes it's just Surviving together, Emma nodded, but her heart didn't agree. Surviving wasn't enough anymore. She wanted to feel alive again. At the art center, things felt different. David noticed her mood immediately. "You seem distracted," he said, one afternoon as they cleaned up brushes. She smiled faintly. "Just life." He chuckled. "Life tends to do that. Pulls us in all directions." Their conversations were never deep on purpose, but they always found meaning between the lines. David talked about his late wife, how losing her had taught him to appreciate the small things. Emma listened quietly, realizing how much she missed being heard like this. One day, David showed her a new painting, two hands almost touching, with light breaking through the space between them. "It's about connection," he explained. "Sometimes we're close to something, but not quite there." Emma stared at the painting longer than she should have. It mirrored exactly how she felt. "You understand that feeling, don't you?" he asked softly. She met his eyes, her heart tightening. "More than I'd like to admit." Later that week, Mark called from his business trip. His voice was rushed, tired. "I'll be home Sunday night," he said. Emma wanted to tell him she missed him, but when she tried, the words wouldn't come. It wasn't anger or resentment. It was emptiness, like speaking to someone through a wall. That Sunday, he returned late. She waited with dinner, but he barely noticed. "I already ate," he said, heading to his office to finish a report. As she cleared the untouched food, Emma felt her chest tighten. It wasn't about the meal. It was about the effort, the simple gestures that used to mean something. When she walked past his office, she paused by the door. He looked up briefly. "Everything okay?" She forced a smile. "Yeah, everything's fine." But everything wasn't fine. A few days later, the Art Center announced a weekend retreat for local artists, a small event by the lakeside. David encouraged Emma to come. "It's peaceful there," he said. "Might help you clear your mind." She hesitated. "I'm not sure Mark would understand." "Sometimes," David said gently, "we need to do things that help us remember who we are, not who people expect us to be." Those words stayed with her all night. The next morning, she mentioned it to Mark over breakfast. "It's just a weekend art retreat," she said carefully. "I think it might help me feel more balanced." Mark barely looked up from his phone. "If you think it'll help, go ahead." That was it. No curiosity, no warmth, just permission spoken out of habit. So she went. The retreat was held near a quiet lake surrounded by pine trees and open skies. The cabins were simple but cozy. The air smelled of wood and rain. Emma felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. People painted, laughed, and shared stories around a fire at night. David was there too, guiding the group through creative exercises. He was never overly familiar, always respectful, but his presence brought her calm. He noticed when she struggled with a sketch, when her hands trembled as she tried to capture emotions she didn't have words for. "You're holding back," he said quietly. One afternoon, as they sat near the water, she looked down. "Maybe I'm afraid of what I'll see if I stop." He smiled kindly. "Sometimes fear shows us what matters most." His words felt like truth, gentle but powerful. That night, as everyone gathered by the fire, Emma felt something shift inside her. Not romance, not desire, but the realization that she had forgotten herself. She had spent years being everything for everyone else, a wife, a mother, a helper, and somewhere in all of that, she had lost her own voice when she returned home. Mark was on the couch watching TV. He looked up briefly. "How was it?" "It was nice," she said. "Peaceful." He nodded, eyes back on the screen. "Glad you had fun." The conversation ended there. Emma went upstairs, unpacked her things, and sat on the edge of the bed. The loneliness felt heavier now, not because she missed David, but because she finally saw how distant her marriage had become. The next day, she tried to talk again. "Mark, can we do something together? Maybe dinner out this weekend?" He didn't look away from his laptop. "I'll check my schedule. This project is killing me." Emma bit her lip. "You always have a project." He sighed. "Emma, please. I'm trying to provide for us. Isn't that enough?" She wanted to say no, that love was more than bills and stability. But she stayed silent as weeks passed. The emotional distance grew unbearable. Emma found herself painting more late at night, early in the morning. Her art became her only outlet. She painted what she couldn't say: loneliness, fading love. It's the ache of waiting to be seen. David occasionally messaged to check in about her work, her progress, not her feelings. Yet every message reminded her of how much she missed being genuinely understood. One evening, he showed one of her new paintings to Mark. "What do you think?" she asked hopefully. He glanced at it for a second. "It's good," he said flatly. "You're really getting into this art thing." Then he went back to his computer. That moment broke something in her. Not because he didn't care, but because he didn't realize how much that small acknowledgement could have meant. One afternoon, Claire visited again. "You look exhausted," she said. Emma laughed softly. "Maybe I am." Claire looked at her with concern. "Emma, are you happy?" The question hung in the air. Happiness felt like a distant word, something that belonged to another lifetime. "I don't know," she whispered. "I think I've forgotten what that feels like." Claire reached for her hand. "Don't let yourself fade. You deserve to feel alive." That night, those words echoed in her mind. She sat in her studio, staring at her unfinished painting, the two hands almost touching. Tears welled up as she realized how perfectly it symbolized her life. She and Mark were still reaching for each other, but the space between them had grown too wide. A few days later, Mark came home earlier than usual. "We should talk," he said, surprising her. Her heart raced. "About what?" He looked tired, his eyes heavy with something she couldn't read. "I know I've been distant. I just don't know how to fix it anymore." Emma froze. She had waited years to hear those words, but now they felt too late. "Do you even want to fix it?" she asked quietly. He hesitated. "Of course I do. But I don't know where to start." Tears filled her eyes. "Maybe we start by being honest. With ourselves." They sat there in silence, two people who once shared everything, struggling to find words that could bridge a chasm built over years of silence. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She stood by the window, watching the lights flicker outside. She didn't know what the future held, whether she could rebuild her marriage or if it was already too late. But she knew one thing for sure: pretending wasn't enough anymore. As she turned off the light, a quiet determination grew in her heart. She didn't need someone to save her, she needed to save herself. And maybe, just maybe, that would be the beginning of everything she had been searching for. The morning after their talk, Emma woke to a strange quietness in the house. The kind that felt heavy, like the air itself was waiting for something. Mark had already left for work, his side of the bed cold, untouched. She sat there for a long time, staring at the window where soft light spilled across the floor. For the first time, she realized that her heart wasn't just tired, it was empty. An emptiness, she thought, could be louder than anger. Over the next few days, she tried to act normal. She cooked, cleaned, painted, and smiled when she had to. But inside, she was unraveling. Every routine felt meaningless. Every silence between her and Mark felt wider. Even when they sat together at dinner, they spoke in short, polite sentences, like strangers being careful not to offend each other. Then one evening, David messaged her. "I'm hosting a small exhibit next week. Some of your work deserves to be seen." Her first instinct was to refuse. She didn't feel ready. But something in her whispered, "Go." Maybe it wasn't about the art. Maybe it was about finding a piece of herself again. So she agreed. The night of the exhibition, the gallery was softly lit, filled with quiet conversations and the smell of fresh paint. Emma wore a simple blue dress, nothing fancy, but it made her feel alive again. Her paintings hung neatly on the wall, including her favorite, the two hands almost touching. David found her standing before it. "You finally finished it," he said, smiling. She nodded. "Yes, it's about connection and distance, about how close we can be even when we're far apart." He looked at her, understanding more than her words. "You've changed, Emma. There's strength in your eyes now." Its compliment felt kind, not romantic, and that made it even more powerful. For once, someone saw her not as a wife or mother, but as a person who had rebuilt herself. They talked for a while about art, healing, and learning to let go of pain. When the evening ended, David thanked her. "You reminded me that beauty can come even from heartbreak," he said. Emma smiled. "You reminded me that I still have something to give." When she left the gallery, she felt lighter than she had in years. The city lights reflected in her eyes, and for a brief moment, she felt free. But freedom has a way of testing people. When Emma returned home, Mark was sitting on the couch, waiting. His face was tense, his eyes tired. "You didn't tell me there was an exhibition," he said quietly. She froze. "I didn't think you'd be interested," he sighed. "That's exactly the problem, isn't it? You don't think I'd care anymore?" Emma looked at him, her voice trembling. "Do you?" Mark hesitated. "I used to, I still do. But everything between us feels broken." There it was, the truth, finally spoken aloud. Emma sat down across from him. "Mark, I've tried for so long to fix this, to reach you. But you're always somewhere else. Your work, your phone, your silence." He rubbed his face with both hands. "You think I don't notice? I know I've failed you. I didn't know how to make it right." The words hit her harder than she expected. For so long, she thought he didn't care. But now, hearing the guilt in his voice, she saw something different. A man who was also lost. That night, they didn't fight. They just talked honestly. For the first time in years, Mark told her how he'd felt pressured to be perfect, to provide everything she needed. "I thought if I worked harder, you'd be happy," he said. Emma shook her head. "I never wanted perfection, Mark. I just wanted you, your time, your voice, your heart." Silence followed. Not an angry one, but the kind that comes when two people finally begin to understand each other before going to bed. Mark said quietly, "I don't want to lose you, Emma, but I don't even know if you still love me." She looked at him with tears in her eyes. "I don't know either," she whispered, "but I want to find out." The next morning, Emma decided to take a walk by the lake, the same one from the art retreat. The air was cool and the water shimmered in the sunlight. She thought about everything, the years of silence, the brief connection she'd felt with David, and the fragile possibility of rebuilding with Mark. She realized something. It's profound. What she truly missed wasn't romance or excitement, it was being seen. She wanted to be valued, to feel alive, and to be loved with presence, not just duty. For the first time, she didn't feel angry at Mark. She felt compassion for both of them. They had simply drifted, each trying to survive in their own way. That evening, she came home with a quiet resolve. Mark was at the table, sorting through work papers. She sat across from him. "I've been thinking," she began. "Maybe we both forgot what love looks like. Maybe it's not the same as before, but it doesn't have to be over." He looked up slowly. "You think we can fix this?" She smiled sadly. "I think we can try. Not because we owe each other, but because we once made a promise to care, and I still believe in that." Mark stared at her, his eyes softening. "I want to try too. I don't want to live like strangers anymore." For the first time in years, they reached for each other's hands, hesitant at first, but real. The same gesture she had painted on canvas now played out before her eyes. This time not as art, but as life. The days that followed were not easy. Healing rarely is. They went to counseling, took long walks, and relearned how to talk without hurting. Sometimes they laughed, sometimes they cried. But slowly, something began to grow again. Not the old love, but a new kind, gentler and wiser. Emma stopped visiting the art center for a while. Not out of avoidance, but to focus on her home. She still painted, though, late at night when the world was quiet. Her art became lighter, filled with color and hope. David visited one afternoon to drop off some of her artwork from the exhibit. He smiled when he saw her. "You look different," he said. "I feel different," she replied. "I'm finally choosing peace over pain." He nodded, understanding. "You found what you were looking for." She looked toward the living room where Mark was fixing a shelf. Maybe I did, she said softly. Months passed, and their home began to feel warm again. There were still moments of frustration, but also laughter that echoed through the rooms like it used to. Emma started teaching art classes at the community center, helping others find healing through creativity, just as she had. One evening, while cleaning up her brushes, she looked at the old painting, the two hands almost touching. With a small smile, she added a final stroke, connecting them. Mark entered quietly behind her. "It's beautiful," he said. "It's finally finished," she replied. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "So are we." She leaned her head on his chest. "No," she said. "We're just beginning again." Years later, Emma's art would hang in small local galleries, not for fame, but as a reminder of resilience and forgiveness. People would ask her what inspired her most famous piece, the one with the hands, touching beneath a golden light. And she would always smile and say, "It's about learning that love isn't perfect. It's about choosing to stay, even when it's hard. Because sometimes the most beautiful art comes from the cracks we dare to heal."